major regulatory and workforce challenges. We're Food Processing Skills Canada, FPSC. We support the food and beverage processing industry from coast to coast by helping build an exceptionally skilled workforce. The food industry is a major economic powerhouse in Canada, employing 1 in 8 Canadians and producing billions of dollars in goods every year. But with continued growth comes major regulatory and workforce challenges, including the need for tens of thousands of skilled workers by 2030. That's where FPSC comes in. We consistently secure funding and deliver forward-thinking programs, training, tools, and resources that help the industry grow. Our food skills library and self-paced e-learning make training easier and more effective. Our Food Cert program recognizes worker skills and strengthens food quality and safety across Canada. And our National Accreditation Program supports industry-aligned education through the Canadian National Occupational Standards. We also provide up-to-date labor market insights and help employers connect with new Canadians and Indigenous communities, creating stronger pathways into the sector. Our vision is simple: to educate, cultivate, and empower an exceptionally skilled workforce. Because when we set people up for success, we set Canada up for success too. Together, we feed Canada. Talk to us today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jennifer Griffith, and I'm the Executive Director at Food Processing Skills Canada, and we're very pleased to have you with us today and hope you find this session informative, practical, and useful for your daily work. We're really excited. I'm really excited that we have this new directorate at CFIA for industry. I think this is something that's been long needed for a while and in the making, and we're really glad to be able to present this to everyone and really help with so many things that are going on right now with our tariff situation that's happening, interprovincial trade, things we need to get moving, the increase for domestic processing in Canada. I think this is something that's very much needed. So this webinar is recorded. You will receive the recording after the session along with the presentation. And we will have question and answer period following the presentation. So please be sure to use the Q&A box to ask your questions so we can read those off at the end of the presentation. And then AI readers, external recordings are unauthorized for this presentation as well. So today's webinar will introduce a new capacity at CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, designed to help businesses better navigate federal requirements and access the support they need to move forward. The CFA has recently established the Business Enablement and Service Improvement Directorate, which brings a business enablement lens to a range of CFIA activities. A key part of this work is providing tailored advice and guidance to food companies seeking a federal license, helping businesses better understand the licensing process and what is required to meet federal expectations. So for today's session, we're pleased to welcome Jay Holmes, Executive Director of the Business Enablement and Service Improvement Directorate at CFIA. So Jay will provide an overview of this new directorate, its role within CFIA, and the new services that are available to businesses seeking federal licensing. So Jay, I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. It's really great to be invited to something like this. To me, it's proof that you never know who you're going to sit beside on a flight. Because I met your colleague just sort of by chance. We happened to go to the same meeting, Kevin, and we had a really good conversation. I'm glad it sort of evolved into this because, one thing, as Jennifer said, we're really trying to make people aware of what we're doing at the CFI, which is a bit different than we've done in the past. And I can't, the simplest way we can put it, I got to say is, we're trying to make sure that there's more Canadians buying more Canadian food. That's it. And we know that the best way to do that is to help the people, the small businesses, the medium businesses who are making that food. And that honestly is informing all of our thinking and all of what we're doing. And that'll sort of flow through what we talk about today. But really our goal is as simple as that. But when I came into work on Monday morning, it was after all the stuff from the weekend. And I thought, well, I'm glad we're doing this. It's more important than ever that we're talking about this, making sure people know what supports are available to them to help them navigate sort of tough times. So I'll jump right into the deck. if that's okay with you folks. We can go to the next slide.
Perfect.
And yeah, as was mentioned at the beginning, our goal is to introduce you to us. So I'm the Executive Director of the Business Enablement Service Improvement Directorate. I'll give you a sense of, well, what does business enablement really mean at the CFI and what are you doing? I'll talk about how we're approaching that whole question of how do we trade more food internally in Canada, give you a sense of, who's on our team, what it is we do, and what services we provide. And I would love to hear a bit more. You can ask us anything, but I would love to hear too, what are the opportunities and challenges you folks see? Because you're the ones out there in business navigating kind of the federal system. So if you have thoughts or questions on that, I'd be really pleased to hear that. But we can jump to the next slide. So honestly, what is it we do? If they're in the gray box, we're supporting business activity by trying to give people tailored guidance and improved CFI services that build on our science-based regulations. We think a lot of the SFCR. It gives us safe food. It gives us access to the world in terms of market access. And so everything we do is going to be still built on that really solid foundation that we've put together over the past few years. And that's essentially what business enablement means. If we do this right, there will be more Canadians eating more Canadian food at the end of the day, which is like I said at the beginning, the goal. And who are we in terms of kind of structure and function? I'll start over on the far right, the sort of robot person there. So we have a business service improvement division, and I'm here. I should introduce her too. I have my colleague Simmer Randall here with us today. She's based in Calgary. She is the manager of the group that's really providing that concierge service to food businesses. The division I'm talking about is not hers, it's the other division in our directorate. They're having a hard look at the CFIA services that we provide, whether it's, something like My CFIA, which is kind of, when you start interacting with the CFIA, that's the first thing you see. And, one of her or part of her marching orders for the next couple months is saying, is that service as efficient as it could be for a business? Because if we make it more efficient for a business, it'll translate to efficiencies for the CFIA too. If it takes fewer hours on the CFIA side or a business side to get through and to make use of My CFIA, well, guess what? CFIA has saved resources, businesses have saved money. There's a whole sort of competitiveness benefit to that. So we have a group looking specifically at that, our services. Then there's the division that Simmer belongs to. It's the business enablement division. And honestly, it's trying to do just what it says on the label, enable business in Canada. And it's the group that provides that kind of one-on-one direct support to businesses who want to get into the CFI system, want to be trading more food internally, and eventually to consider exporting as well. And what they're doing on their end, in addition to that one-on-one support, they're coming up with those new tools and products that really are going to help people try to figure out and comprehend what the federal system looks like and how to get through it. Beyond that, in the sort of on the far left there, the orange boxes, that's more of internal for us. But what they're trying to do is articulate for the CFIA writ large, like what's the CFIA's approach to business enablement. It's something we're thinking more about. You may have seen back in June, the CFIA actually made some changes to the CFIA Act to clarify, I would say, what the CFIA's mandate is. And part of that clarification or part of that addition to the CFI Act is putting in the law of the land a note to say, well, it is important for us to consider economic factors as we make decisions and we design programming. So I think that's all like I said, all in keeping with that notion of us trading more food in Canada. So I'll jump to the next. Like I said at the beginning, I've mentioned internal trade a lot, and it has been for 2 years, well, more than that. It's been a long time. It's been a high priority for the government of Canada and for provinces and territories to figure this thing out. So we have Federation in Canada, we have provinces with rules and territories with food rules. We have a federal system or a federal set of rules, and we've been trying to figure out, what's the best way to trade more food in Canada and to fit those pieces together or to recognize the fact that there's different jurisdictions. We did a lot of work last year under what was called Bill C5 or the Free Trade and Labor Mobility for Canada Act to think through how does that or how should that approach food or consider food, and where that landed and there's a lot of support from the provinces and territories on this and the federal government. We all came to that conclusion at the end of the day that we need to leverage that federal set of rules, the Safe Food for Canadians regulations, the food and drug regulations, to be the basis for internal trade of food in Canada. And there's a few reasons why that's important. So number one, once we did all the analysis to say, well, how does food move within Canada? A lot of food, over 60% of food, already trades within Canada under federal oversight. So that's telling us that there is a lot of appetite, like that federal system is working well for some commodities like meat, fresh fruit and veg, seafood. It's well over 70% that already trades under the federal system. So we took that and we said, okay, so there's a gap. 70% is not 100. There's work for us to do to move that number up. But it's showing us that there is some value in that federal system. The other thing that the federal rules do is those are the rules that give us access to the world. And those are the set of rules that when we export to other countries, that's what they assess to determine are they going to let Canadian food into the US or China, South Korea, Japan, the EU, the big trading partners. They look at those. So preserving that federal set of rules as the basis for trade, it's going to continue to ensure that we have access to our markets abroad. It also helps to set a bar for imports. Diluting the federal standard means we would lose our ability to say no to kind of low cost, low quality imports that would kind of undercut or maybe disrupt Canadian business producing food. So there was a lot of agreement around the table to say, you know what, the federal system or the federal set of rules is the way to go to trade food in Canada under. At the same time, we know there's work to do to help people get up into that system. And that's what I'll spend the rest of my time talking about. We can go to the next slide. And so when I say help to businesses or when I talk about meeting one-on-one with businesses, I'd like to give you a sense of where that approach or where that concept came from. And it grew out of some work that we were doing with Ontario over the past 2 years. We had a pilot project with them called Ready to Grow, where the Ontario government came to us with a group of 10 businesses. I think it was more kind of on the meat side of things. We'll work with any food, but at the time, Ready to Grow was more meat focused. They came to us and said, these are companies that would like to sell their products in new markets in other provinces. How do we help them? And so what we did was, we started from really basic and said, well, let's go meet with them all and have a chat and say, okay, who are you as a business? What is it you want to do? And what do you find difficult about complying with the federal system or getting up into that federal system? And I have to say, I went to all these myself, and I have to say every single time within the first 5 minutes of the conversation, you would hear about 3 or 4 myths or misconceptions that people had about what they need to do to get into the federal system. And it ranged from, I have to pave the driveway where the animals arrive at my abattoir. It's like, no, that was an old rule. It could be gravel, it could be whatever. Or I have to duplicate all of my equipment. If I'm making some food under a provincial license, well, I have to buy separate machinery or separate equipment to make the federal. That's not the case. There's a lot of flexibility that we built into the federal rules to accommodate somebody being provincially licensed and federally licensed at the same time. So these conversations allowed us to kind of pivot from what the misconception might be. It probably won't cost you $1 million to refit your place, and then to work or to talk about the flexibility that lives within the federal system. And a lot of times it was really eye-opening for people to hear this fact that, if you had one product that you wanted to sell interprovincially, we could set up a license under the CFIA or under the SFCR for you, where you operated 1 day a week federally for that product alone. So you don't have to become a completely different business just for us. We can help bring the SFCR, bring that federal license in so you can complement or add to your business. And so I think that people understanding that, I think, was a game changer for us. And it was something where we got a lot of it resonated well with people. And we got a lot of good feedback. We also heard some constructive criticism, I would say, maybe about the guidance that the CFI offers. In the past, I'd say we have a tremendous amount of very good guidance on our website. Our old approach may have been more of kind of a self-service model, where we would say, if you spoke to us, we'd say, well, here's some guidance. If you want to apply for a license, follow this, and then make an application. Like I said, more of a self-serve, but the feedback we were getting was, well, sometimes, especially if you're a small business, it's difficult to know where to even start or get started. Sometimes it can be just overwhelming, the quantity of guidance. So that's something we took back as well. And it was out of all of that we developed this model that Simmer and her team are executing right now, that's more client-centered and it's more advice-focused, to say, let's sit down and let's hear what people need help with. and then try to actually fix those particular problems that they put on the radar for us. And so doing this, like, not only does it help people trade food interprovincially, helps people get up into the federal system, so it helps maintain the integrity of that federal system as well. So it's kind of a win-win from our perspective. So if you go to the next. And so, like I said, that was the sort of the genesis of what we're doing. April 1st, our directorate officially came into being at the CFIA, and we've hit the ground running with this model. And since that time, or since those early days of Ready to Grow, we've worked with over 100 companies across Canada, the provinces, the territories, every kind of food you could name. We've worked with these folks to do exactly what I said, have that conversation about, well, what is it you need help understanding? Is it just understanding the process? We can get as detailed as sitting down with you and walking you through how you are supposed to write your preventive control plan and give advice from that perspective. And the nice thing about us being created, or us coming into being on April 1st too, is I'll tell you, we exist in the CFI sort of separate from our inspectorate. So we're in a bit more of a different position to be able to give advice. The inspectors are still going to be out there making those decisions at the end of the day. Did you comply or not? That's their job. They're enforcing the law of the land. But on our end, being separate from that, we can have a bit of a different conversation to say, well, okay, what advice can we give you? How can we help you get your ducks in a row so that when you do apply for a license, when you do have that conversation with an inspector, it goes smoothly, and it's not like here's a laundry list of things that you have to correct or fix for the CFIA. And like I said, we're now at the point where we've worked with over 100 companies. We're starting to see some really cool results. We can already point to an economic gain. We've helped. We do some tracking of, once we get someone licensed, what amount of food are they selling? We can already point to millions of dollars of additional trade of food in Canada that's happening every year because of this work where we've helped different companies. We can also point to, some really interesting examples where, and you see them right here, our help can be as simple as, helping that livestock producer connect with a federally licensed abattoir that's nearby them, where they can have their animals slaughtered so that meat can go into multiple provinces. We also worked with a facility out west that was selling or providing prepared meals direct to grocery stores in Alberta. Worked with them to get a license. They can now serve other stores in BC, Manitoba, Saskatchewan. For them, that was a really big deal. It enabled them to double their production. It enabled them to hire new staff. So we see kind of that ripple effect or that benefit of having the federal license, what it will mean to a business or what it can mean to an economy. So for us, it's really encouraging. We've also worked with other companies. We worked with a small soybean refiner here in Ontario, where they've gone from just selling soybeans to moving up the value chain to producing powdered soy milk, which they can sell within Canada. They can export that abroad, and they have plans in their mind that could result in millions of dollars of sales in the future. So just to give you a sense of where we're starting to see those results. We're trying to not stand still, and we're scaling up our work. And what we're doing right now is, since April 1st, you've seen the publication of the National Food Security Strategy. And so the CFI is involved in that, in the sense that it mentions, or it talks about what we're doing in terms of business enablement and providing this sort of concierge style service. But it also mentioned, or it also provides funding for Agriculture Canada and for the regional development agencies to also do more of their part to help people increase processing capacity in Canada, comply with regulatory requirements. So we're doing some work at the moment with the regional development agencies and with AAFC to sort of coordinate our messaging to make sure that we're going out there as a sort of a Team Canada to say, we're all here to help. We're all sort of pulling on our individual levers at the same time. And whether it's the CFI giving some advice about how to navigate the license process, or it's Agriculture Canada and the regional development agencies providing some funding for a piece of equipment so that you can, increase your capacity, or to hire a consultant to do, a preventive control plan to comply with the requirements. We're at the point now where we're coordinating our messaging, and what you should see over the fall is us out there as more of a Team Can, not just the CFIA saying we're here to help, but government writ large doing the same thing. So I'll pivot to the next slide. This is really important. This is a key thing for us. It's just sort of what do we do, what do we not do in terms of providing advice. Like I said, we'll explain a process, a requirement, an expectation. We'll help you find the right pathway to licensing, help people navigate my CFIA if that's needed. We can refer people to resources if they need that. We can be kind of a bridge as well. When someone's ready to apply for a license, we can sit down with them and have a meeting with the local inspectorate to say, okay, now is the point where we kind of hand you over to the folks who are going to actually, check your work or check your homework that you've been doing with us and make that connection to make sure things go smoothly on the licensing front. It's important to note what we don't do as well. Like I said, we don't make the regulatory decisions or provide exemptions. We're just here to, like I said, get the ducks in a row so that your permission goes as smoothly as possible. And what we don't do is we don't complete a prevent control plan, or we don't submit a license application on people's behalf. They still have to sort of do that themselves or hire a consultant. But we can be there on day one as you sit down with the consultant to write the preventive control plan to just make sure it kind of stays on the straight and narrow as it goes through the process. So we can jump to the next. I think this slide covers a lot of it. Like I said, we can walk you through the license process, work directly with you. We've tried to make this as frictionless or as painless as possible to get in touch with us. So what we've done, this is something cool on our end. We've set this up, scan the QR code, you click a button, and you can be in touch with Simmer and her team. Somebody will get in touch with you personally, one of her team, to have that initial conversation to say, how can we help you trade more food in Canada? So we've tried to make it as simple as possible. I think we have a sort of a poster or something we can share that can be sent around after this that has the QR code, has our information. So like I said, new approach for the CFIA, something that I'm glad it's resonating with people, but I'll maybe stop there in case there's questions.
All right, perfect. That was quick and efficient. 125. It's great.
Done this presentation a few times so far.
Yeah. So how big is the team right now, I guess, at Simmers? And like, is it influx? What's the turnaround time that people get back to you? Things like that.
The team, it's about 10, 12 people in the division, I would say. But Simmer, how big is your own part of that?
We are at about 6 people right now, including me. And the turnaround time is very quick right now because we are able to cater to a lot of people or businesses who are reaching out to us. We are very quick to respond. You will get a response by email pretty much the same day or the next day, and then we will schedule a virtual meeting with the business who would like some support within the week or so. So it's not taking too long. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Okay, so here's a question that's come in from Lisa. I often hear that for small processors, getting federal licensing is costly, time-consuming, and overly administratively burdensome. So they don't want to even go down that path. What is the cost and time process, which I'm sure must vary, but
Yes, it does vary, but there's some fixed costs. I mean, there's the cost of the license, which is $300 every 2 years, which is not a big amount of money. It does depend a bit on what food you're producing. So if somebody is in the meat processing business, there's a fee that's going to be charged for the daily inspection that the CFI does. If you get into slaughter, then you're starting to move up the cost schedule, I would say. But if you're a small meat abattoir and meat processor, I don't think it goes over $20,000 per year to have the actual inspector and the veterinarian in there doing their thing. So and that's the cost of doing business with the CFI once you have your license.
okay.
In terms of how much does it cost to get the license, that's actually a fascinating question, and one we've dug into a lot. And as you said, Jennifer, it's gonna vary by what state the business is in. To be perfectly honest, although in doing the work with Ontario, we've encountered businesses where someone has told them or they've been advised that, oh, you have to build a whole new freezer to hold the federal food. It's not the case. Like the way it works with us is, especially when you're talking about something, an entity that's federally and provincially licensed at the same time, all we care about is that you have an effective way to segregate the food. So if
Right.
it's in the same freezer and you have a shelf for the federal and a shelf for the provincial, that works for us. Like that flexibility is built into our rules. And so that's the kind of thing that we can walk through with a business when we meet with them. The other thing I've heard about is loading docks, a lot actually. We've been to some businesses where they say, well, I only have one loading dock. And so
Right,
you expect me to have one for shipping and one for receiving. We say, no, 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 that's not the case. I've been to some places where the loading dock was a door. And
right.
what's important to us is that you can just document how you're using that space to make sure what comes in doesn't contaminate what goes out.
What
And
comes
it
out?
can be up to you how you do that in time and space, but you don't have to necessarily do hundreds of thousands of dollars of renovations just for us. On the other end of that spectrum, we've seen places where, there's birds nesting in the rafters above the production area, whether you're provincial or federal. Hopefully they will both tell you that doesn't work. And so there's some cost with things like that. But again, it comes down to the business and comes down to what the state of things are. An inspector can walk any plant in Canada, federal, provincial inspector will walk around and find some chipped paint and say, well,
Yeah.
you should fix that kind of thing. So it could range
Mhm.
from $10,000 to fix the drain or chip paint, or if you have birds nesting in the ceiling, well, you may have to do something about that. But
Mhm.
the important thing, I think, is to have the conversation with us so we can really sort of bring the reality of the federal system to that question.
Yeah. No, that's really good. There's so many myths, I think, out there and misunderstandings amongst manufacturers that this service will be key to really demystify that because I've been to numerous plants within the country and you can see the differences for sure between some of the provincial versus federally licensed plants and things like that. There are differences. And yeah, they think there's room for a lot of the, to get to the federal level for sure. Okay, here's another question. For a smaller, medium-sized food processor that wants to expand into other provinces, what should I do first to determine whether I am ready for a federal licensing?
I think that the first thing you can do is have a chat with us. And the first thing you can do is scan the QR code, click the button. I think it asks a few questions about, your address and what kind of food do you make and how much of it, and et cetera, and your location. And we'll get in touch with you. And I think that's the best way to see where you're at. The way a conversation kind of goes is, we say, what do you have to comply with today? And again, it's going to vary by province. It's going to vary by what you're doing. We can have a conversation about, well, do you have a HACCP? Do you have HACCP plan in place already?
Right.
Businesses that already have that in place puts them, a good chunk of the way down the road.
Yeah.
For us, the big thing is always that somebody has a written and documented, we call it a preventive control plan in the SFCR, but that they have a food safety plan, like a HACCP plan written down. Once we have that initial conversation, we can kind of give some feedback about where we think you are on that journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your PCP plans are very important, but there's a lot of steps to having a really good preventative control plan. You know that. There was a question here too. Is this a temporary department? Was a question, was kind of interesting.
Was, but not anymore, is the quick answer to that. So we were created, like I said, it all grew out of the internal trade work that we did over the past few years. We had some temporary funding for the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, we've done a good enough job that they've made that ongoing or permanent for us. And that was the big thing for us in the national food security strategy is it made this function a permanent one at the CFIA. So I was personally, and Simmer and team were very happy about that, for sure. So we shouldn't be going anywhere.
Wonderful. Another question. You mentioned that your team operates separately from CFIA's inspection arm and is able to provide guidance to industry and navigating regulatory issues. Would that mandate also include providing guidance where a nonconformity has already been identified, but there is a lack of clarity regarding the interpretation of the required corrective action? Or what specifically constitutes a return to compliance?
Our sort of target audience for the service is people who don't have licenses yet. So if you're in that position, you already have a license with the CFI, or already have a permission, and so the best thing to do is work through that inspectorate. Now that said, like I do hear that often about in addition to clarity of guidance, is about how do I escalate things within the CFIA, and I think that conversation is best had through the inspectorate when
Yeah.
you're in that position.
Mm-hmm. Right. So where do you see the greatest opportunity for Canadian manufacturers, food manufacturers, to expand through interprovincial trade? And what barriers still remain?
Right. Well, that's a lot in that question.
Yeah, I know.
I'll be honest, I am, and it's interesting as we work with businesses where we start to see people asking for, or people in similar situations. And so that gives us a sense of like what are you call it a trend, or what's the level of interest in particular products.
Hmm.
And one thing that we've seen a lot of interest in is people who are either distilleries or breweries who want to
Yeah,
pivot and get into the non-alcoholic beverage space.
right.
So if you're doing alcoholic beverages, good news, you don't need a license from the CFIA. You have other things that you have to comply with. But as soon as you make that switch into a juice or some sort of beverage, it's a food. And so that
Yeah.
brings the SFCR into play. And so we've seen quite a number of those businesses come up. Meat's a perennial. Seen a
Yeah.
lot of interest from that perspective, whether it's sort of those processed products, mostly those sort of the high value, like the kielbases and, cured meats, things like that. A lot of interest in that. On the slaughter side too, there's a fair bit of interest in that, and again too, we do see it in manufactured food also, and we would love to see a lot more of those people coming forward in that manufactured food space, because generally speaking, it's a lot the preventive control plans that you need to be a coffee roaster or something like that, a lot simpler than if you're an abattoir. And so there's a lot
Right.
we can do to help people get up and running who make those kinds of foods. And I would really encourage those folks who make manufactured foods, cookies, biscuits, sauces, you name it, to scan the
Mhm.
QR code and click on the button and get in touch with us.
Yeah, there's actually a pretty large one that's been in Newfoundland for many years, I think 100 years. And they pretty much stick to Newfoundland and a couple of other eastern provinces, but wow, I think there's a great opportunity to keep going west.
It'd be a lot easier than people think. And then the best way to answer that or to test that premise is to get in touch with us for sure.
Hmm. Is there any assistance for getting ready to export outside of Canada? Or is that an EDC thing? Or I'm not sure if that's something.
EDC has a role to play for sure. Our support for somebody who wanted to do that would be to just help them get that SFCR license. At the time when they talk to us, they'd say, well, I want to produce domestically or I want to export. And then for us, then it's, what do they tick on the license application? So it's definitely a conversation we can have. And we can do, again, it's kind of like the CFIA is part of that question. I know EDC offers those different supports about sort of market making and sort of insurance and things like that, funding wise. But yeah, we're happy to talk to somebody who has kind of their eye on an export market as well.
Hmm. Okay, great. Let me see. What roles can organizations like ours, like Food Processing Schools Canada, industry associations play in connecting businesses with
Tell
this?
people we're here. That's the honestly, that's the biggest thing. And when you're a new service, I mean that's the main thing is, and we're putting so much effort. It's so important for us to get the word out there. Like having a session like today, that's the best thing you can do.
Mm.
And there's no we're in a really fortunate position right now to be in the public service writ large. Like I said, like our funding has become permanent. So like there is
Right.
an emphasis on doing more of what we're doing. If there are events across the country that you're aware of, either as Food Processing Skills Canada, or if you're a member of other associations, we would be happy to show up anytime, anywhere, give this presentation and make people aware of what we're doing. I do have staff across the country. Simmer, as I
Okay.
mentioned, is in Alberta. We have people in BC,
Right.
a few less in the east, but we can put people on planes and have them in a room explaining what we
Yeah,
do for sure.
that's wonderful. Okay, that would be really great to have those connections, and at least we know in every province because we have networks as well across the country. So it's good to know who
Absolutely.
to direct to too. So it'd be great to get that list from you guys. Is there a page that outlines the cost and process for small abattoirs to be licensed on the site or?
On our website, no, it's funny. It is something we've been talking about to have sort of like a rudimentary, like a calculator to say, I have one line. I run it it's not a high speed line. These are the species I'm working with. And then it kind of puts out an estimated cost, for the ongoing, like for the inspection costs. And like I said, too, what we've seen with people who are, they have one line, it's not a high speed line. They're doing beef and pork.
Mhm.
They're operating 1 or 2 days a week federally. Like I said, it gets into that $25,000 a year area, in terms of the ongoing cost for inspection. And then the setup cost, I mean, again, like we said earlier, it depends on kind of the state of things. We've been to one abattoir where amazing abattoir, did hogs, and they said, we know we need a new scalder. And so there's always things that, somebody needs to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does vary. Like I said, best way, scan the QR code and click on the button, and we can talk that through with you.
And the regional agencies, I guess their funding framework is a bit more reasonable than the larger call that's come out. We need a minimum of $20 million investment, to add on to lines and so forth. But the regional agencies, I guess, is your avenue for that if you need new lines and equipment and things like
Yeah,
that.
we're a bit ahead of them just because we started this work sort of last year, and they're at that point because they're getting that funding through National Food Security Strategy. They're putting their programming together, and getting that story ready to put out there. I was in Saskatchewan earlier in the year, where we did a presentation jointly with Prairies Canada, where I did this essentially.
Mm,
Then they followed up with saying, okay, and we're here, we can provide funding, and I think it was. I forget the acronym, but it was RTRI, which was the Tariff Response Fund that they
right,
have. And they say, here's what we have, and here's what it can be used for, and here's how to access it. And one of the things was to hire a consultant to do your preventive control plan.
right.
So I don't know if every regional development agency is going to have that model, but speaking like this is what I've seen from Prairies Canada. So I would expect something similar from all of them shortly.
Okay, perfect. And then I think you answered this question. Will you have people placed strategically across Canada to understand local markets, or is it just Calgary and Ottawa?
They are across Canada. I don't know how strategically the strategy in this is what I want, or the expertise we need is people who know inspection and who know preventive control plans. And so we try to find those people across the country, and there's lots of them because we have inspectors across the country. Most of Simmer's team is former inspectors or people who did a lot of that in previous jobs at the CFIA.
Mhm.
But yeah, we're definitely trying to make sure we have a footprint in BC, Alberta, Prairies, Ontario. It's easy because we have Ontario, so we have Ottawa and folks in Guelph, and definitely doing some hiring in Quebec and the Atlantic right now too.
Right. Okay, wonderful. We are an association of women in ag and food. We are considering starting a campaign to promote buy local to help local producers. Is there anything your unit can do to help us with the promotional campaign?
I would love to talk about that more, and I'm happy to speak to whomever. We can maybe meet separately, but there is guidance on the CFI's website about how to make label claims when it's made in Canada food or a product of Canada food. There's slightly
Mhm.
different claims, but happy to have a chat. And if we can put those folks in touch with the labeling people, that's something we can do for sure. It may not be us, but we can be kind of a go-between if that's useful.
Okay, wonderful. How long does it take for the renewal of a company's SFRCR license once the application has been submitted?
If we're talking about renewals, that's somebody who's already had a license, and I know they've changed kind of some processes and service standards over the past several months. I've heard this question from a number of folks.
Mhm.
It's an unfortunate answer. It depends on kind of the risk and the oversight or the investigation that's needed for that particular renewal. What our colleagues tell us is, as soon as you are ready to renew, make sure you're doing it as early as possible to make sure that, if it does fall in the longer end of that spectrum, that 70-day spectrum, that there's lots of time to get it done. But yeah, that group of people would be those who already have licenses with us. If you're talking about a brand new license, that's a really interesting question too. And, we worked with, again, it does vary, but what our experience is showing us is that, if somebody, it can be as short as 6 weeks from first conversation to issuance of a license. This
Mhm.
is a company we worked with who they had decent preventive control plan kind of written, and they were ready to go, didn't need too much guidance from us. That was very quick. We've seen, 2 months for something that was a bit more complicated, involved meat products. And then, it can be several months of work together where you're talking about an abattoir meat processor. So there's somebody we're working with where the initial conversation was in January, and this company just made their application. I think it was a couple weeks ago. So they were starting from like ground zero in terms of having a preventive control plan. But it was a great test case for us because that was one where we actually worked with them from having nothing with their consultant to make sure it all went smoothly. And
Okay.
so we'll see what the result is. They're going to have a pre-license verification inspection, and hopefully that'll sort of pass with flying colors because of all the upfront effort. But it ranges from weeks. It could be months.
Okay, thank you. Can you direct smaller businesses to approved consultants to develop PCP plans? What about grant opportunities?
We don't necessarily pick and choose consultants. We know there's lots of them out there, and we know there's people who can point them in the right direction. It's not a space we get into, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Oh gosh, let's see. Why isn't the provincial licensing a reasonable standard for interprovincial trade? If it's good in one province, why can't it be accepted in another province? Reserving federal licensing for international exports and accepting both federal and provincial for interprovincial.
It's a good question, and honestly, that was the big question that we worked through and wrestled with last year in the context of Bill C5 and the Free Trade and Labor Mobility for Canada Act. And honestly, it does come down to making sure that we still have access to foreign markets. For us, when a country gives us access to their market, they do that based on an assessment of the federal system. And so, it's true that there are provincial systems that, some of them are similar, some aren't, and some are a bit far off similar. However, if Canada were to start allowing trade under different sets of rules that were less than the federal, that's something that right away we would put ourselves at risk of that country taking away that market access. And the sort of the flip side of that is, there are lots of times where we say, no, country X, we don't approve your food coming into Canada. And we say that because the rules in that country don't meet what the SFCR requires.
Right.
Trade agreements being what they are, if we started to allow a lower standard or lesser, whatever, even a little bit, like even if it was a slight deviation, we would have to turn around and say yes to that country that has lower standards than the federal. And that's where you get into this tricky situation where it might be a country where there's a really low cost of production, it might be a really low quality, and then you would make Canadian companies compete against this other country that has that luxury of being a really low cost of production. And then you're starting to put Canadian companies out of business. So it is nice that the federal system lets us set that bar to make sure that everybody's meeting it for what comes in. So I think that's the biggest reason behind it was we don't want to put it's $64 billion of food exports. A lot of that would be put at risk if we were to go to a provincial standard. And, the provinces, when we went through it, when we talked it through with them, everybody kind of agreed at the end of the day, let's all help people get up into that federal system. We can't just tell them to do it. We have to help them do it. And that's sort of how we came into being. So,
yeah. Hey, makes sense. Any other questions here in the chat? I think I've gone through all of them. Pretty
some good questions.
Yeah, very good. Seeing if anything else is coming in here. Oh, here we go. And we'll send out the presentation to everybody afterwards and the QR code and so forth. I want to see, did I miss anything? I don't think so. I think one thing with the National Food Strategy, if we want to increase domestic production, the one piece that was missing was that labor piece. We need the people, and those people will need to be trained and resources and so forth. So that's a big gap for us anyways that we see, and I think that was kind of missing into the whole strategy.
Okay.
So we really we still have to continue to focus on the people. We want to retain the people we have. We've really been focusing on the retention, the reduction of the revolving door, people coming in and out. And, a lot of people retiring now, like that legacy, that information needs to continue on, within the facilities and so forth as well. So, skills development, upskilling training, like we developed our PCP training program with CFIA back in the day still. So, it's just those kind of resources. And that was still even a hard partnership, like to work with CFIA in that. I know you guys don't do that a lot, but now that you have this new directorate, it's more of an arm's length kind of branch. There might be more opportunity to, look at various resources or developing other resources.
Always happy to chat about that. And the labor question is a good one. So I'll pose a question. I don't know what the answer to it is, but I think it's a pertinent one. It might be a good question for the regional development agencies to say, well, can I use this funding on training
Right.
for exactly the reason you just articulated? So I don't know what they'll say, and I wouldn't want to put words in their mouth, but that's the question I might be asking myself. But that's a good point.
Yeah.
And I know too, there was a meeting today of ministers of internal trade, and I know labor was a huge part of that, and hopefully. Left before that session, but hopefully that the questions about labor and skills around food are bubbling up through there. That's another place where it can happen too.
Even yeah, well, some interesting discussions around the north. We've been talking a lot about that and potential production of, right now they're slaughtering sometimes in their garages, things like that. Where are there mobile processing facilities that could be established or something along those lines? What does that look like? Things like that. So we're having discussions and trying to explore
Okay,
different avenues as well. So
great.
yeah, I think there's good opportunities there. Like imagine if CFA is involved from the beginning, right, of these
Yeah,
discussions. I think
the North is a focus for us too, absolutely. So if there are things you're working on, we can try to connect you with the people who are doing that thinking here for sure.
yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you very much to you and Simmer, and thank you for answering all those questions. And we will share this with Sector. But I think as well, like even in our newsletters, we should get the word out that you guys are available.
Yeah, please do.
To SEP. So if there's comms pieces that we could inject in our newsletters and things like that, maybe we can talk offline about that.
And we're doing some social media just to promote this too, and we can share that with you. And if you wanted to sort of retweet or
Yeah.
whatever it is, amplify that message, that'd be great. If I could leave people with one message is nothing stopping you from clicking on scan the QR code, click the button. It's free to talk to us, and the conversation will go where it goes, but nothing stopping you from exploring that with us for sure. That's why we're here and what we want to do.
Wonderful. Great messaging. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who joined us today, and have a great rest of your day. And we'll see you next month.
Thanks, everybody.
Well,